As a child, I was known to throw tantrums whenever things didn't go my way. Unfortunately, that trait never really left me even as I entered adulthood. I continued to throw fits whenever I didn't get what I wanted, whether it was at work or at home. My husband, Jack, was always the target of my tantrums. I would lash out at him over the smallest things, like not doing the dishes or forgetting to take out the trash. At first, Jack was patient with me. He would try to calm me down and talk things out with me. But as the years went by, the constant outbursts took a toll on him. He became more distant and irritable, and we started arguing more frequently. I didn't understand why he was so unhappy, but I didn't bother trying to change my behavior either. I thought that he just needed to toughen up and deal with my tantrums like an adult. One day, I came home early from work and found Jack in our bedroom with another woman. They were both naked, and their clothes were strewn all over the floor. I was devastated. I couldn't believe that Jack would cheat on me. I demanded an explanation, but all he could say was that he was tired of dealing with my tantrums and that he needed someone who wouldn't lash out at him all the time. I was shattered. I never thought that my behavior would drive Jack to cheat on me. I begged him to forgive me and promised to change, but it was too late. He had already made up his mind, and he wanted a divorce. The next few months were a blur of pain and heartache. I couldn't eat or sleep, and I spent most of my days crying. I had lost the love of my life because of my own immaturity and selfishness. It took me a while to accept the reality of the situation, but eventually, I started to see things more clearly. I realized that I needed to take responsibility for my behavior and work on becoming a better person. It wasn't easy, but I started seeing a therapist and working on my emotional regulation. I learned to identify my triggers and cope with my emotions in a healthier way. It was a slow process, but I could feel myself becoming more centered and less reactive. Eventually, I started dating again. I was hesitant at first, but I knew that I couldn't spend the rest of my life alone. I met a man named Tom who was kind and patient with me. He knew about my past and was willing to work through my issues with me. We took things slow, and I was cautious not to fall back into old habits. It's been several years since my divorce, and I'm now happily married to Tom. He's been my rock and has helped me become a better person. Looking back, I realized that my tantrums were a symptom of a deeper issue. I had a lot of unresolved emotional baggage that I needed to work through. While I regret the pain that I caused Jack, I'm grateful for the wake-up call. It forced me to confront my issues and work on becoming a better person. As I sit here, staring at the blank page in front of me, I can't help but reflect on the past few years of my life. I was happily married to my husband, John, for almost a decade when things started to change. John's job required him to travel frequently, and at first, it didn't bother me. In fact, I enjoyed the time alone to focus on my own hobbies and interests. But as the trips became more frequent, and the time between them shorter, I began to feel the distance between us growing. John would leave on Monday morning and return on Friday evening, exhausted from a week of meetings and presentations. At first, he would tell me about his day and we would catch up on the weekend. But as time went on, his stories became shorter, and he seemed less interested in what was happening in my life. I tried to ignore the nagging feeling in my gut that something was wrong, but it only grew stronger. I started to notice subtle changes in John's behavior when he was home. He was more distant, less affectionate, and seemed distracted. I tried to talk to him about it, but he would always brush me off, saying he was just tired from work. It wasn't until I stumbled upon an unfamiliar number on his phone that I realized the truth. I confronted him. And after some hesitation, he admitted that he had been seeing someone else while on his business trips. The news hit me like a ton of bricks. How could he do this to me? To us? John's explanation was that he was lonely, on the road, and the other woman provided him with the companionship and attention he craved. He insisted that it didn't mean anything, that he still loved me and wanted to work through it. But the damage had been done. And I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. Over the next few weeks, we talked and cried and tried to figure out where to go from there. John promised to stop seeing the other woman and work on our relationship, but the trust had been broken. It wasn't long before he was back on the road, and the distance between us grew once again. Despite his promises, I couldn't shake the feeling that John was still seeing the other woman. I became paranoid, checking his phone and email, trying to catch him in the act. It was a miserable way to live, and I knew it wasn't sustainable. In the end, I made the difficult decision to end our marriage. I couldn't live with the constant fear and doubt. And I didn't want to be with someone who could betray me so easily. It was a painful and emotional process, but I knew it was the right choice for me. Looking back, I realized that John's frequent business trips weren't the root of the problem. It was the loneliness and distance that came with them. We could have worked through it if we had communicated better and been more honest with each other. But in the end, we were both too broken to fix what we had lost. Now, years later, I've moved on and found happiness in my own life. I still think about John and what we could have had, but I know that our story was meant to end the way it did. The lonely road of his business trips led to infidelity, but it also led me to a new chapter in my life, one that I wouldn't have found otherwise.